people at the state level and the federal level and too many places in our country are not doing anything other than offering prayers. I'm grateful I'm working in the city with a mayor who's transformative in Sylvester Turner, and what we're starting to see is that local governments are starting to make a difference. We need to start using the ballot box and ballot initiatives to take the matters out of the hands of people that are doing nothing, that are elected, and into the hands of the people to see that the will of the people in this country is actually carried out.
That frustration by the Houston police chief is being felt by a lot of folks right now. Lawmakers not doing enough or even anything in most cases. And another thing that shows us how bad things have gotten, students, they've come to expect school shootings. Don't take my word for it. Listen to a young girl who survived Friday's shooting at Santa Fe High School in Texas.
Was there a part of you that was like, this isn't real, this would not happen in my school?
No, there wasn't.
Why so?
It's been happening everywhere. I've always kind of felt like eventually it was going to happen here too.
Times had a really powerful piece describing the climate in our schools. Quote, the news anchors narrating say that the children are leaving school, but make no mistake, what you are watching, this frightened, exhausted procession, is school now. It is what your children are taught. Lockdown drills, active shooter drills, procedure they've learned, and what you are seeing is a kind of horrible field trip, a deadly exam. You send your kids to school, and one of the things that they learn is how not to die. Meantime, the investigation continues as Texas continues to mourn. Across Texas and here at the scene of yet another deadly high school rampage. A moment of silence for the victims outside Santa Fe High School. Community members gathering around 10 wooden crosses bearing the names of 8 students and 2 teachers killed on Friday. The crosses delivered by a man from Chicago who travels to mass murder sites to pay tribute.
You think I'm just going to leave here and I'm going to be fine? I'm not. I'm going to go home and just going to have a heck of a time here.
The confessed shooter, now charged with capital murder, he sits in a jail in solitary confinement.
Right now, I would say confused and scared. That's not a plea for sympathy or anything. That's just how he looks.
According to police, the 17-year-old yelled surprise before opening fire. And Trent Beasley told Michael Strahan on GMA he heard the suspect even taunting the victims.
Every time he'd kill someone, he'd say another one bites the dust.
We've also learned from investigators pouring through his journals that the suspect carefully studied previous mass shootings, allegedly including aspects of those massacres into his own attack, even wearing a trench coat, a hallmark of the gunman in the Columbine massacre.
Once again, y'all, we're grieving for more kids that have died.
Emotions ran high at the Billboard Music Awards on Sunday, with Texas native Kelly Clarkson reigniting the debate over gun violence in America.
Why don't we not do a moment of silence? Why won't we do a moment of action?
Now, I could bombard you with facts here, but I'll give you one, and this should scare everybody. This year has been deadlier for school kids than it has been for our military personnel. Process that for a minute. More students have been killed than soldiers. I'd rather use our time not than relitigating where the Second Amendment should start and stop and everything else. But for me, the inability to even have a conversation about the one common thing in all of this, guns. I mean, I saw some clips from Fox over the weekend, Fox News Channel, and they had one lieutenant governor in Texas who listed 12 reasons, including everything of video games and everything, but guns. We have a little compilation, but this is just how far we have to go to even have a real conversation in this country. Take a listen for yourself.
Every school district needs to have some person that monitors every kid's social media postings. Maybe you need 2 people.
They spend so much time in front of their television screens with some of these very violent and realistic video games. That has to be something that gets looked at.
People should be flooding their state legislatures, and particularly the state as well as Congress, with demands to bring police officers in school.
Mental health and communities, I think they do need help and support in trying to figure out best practices. What can they do?
They also said it's the politically correct culture that led us to where we are right now.
And the doorways, don't forget. too many doorways in school buildings.
You know what? We could have a mature conversation about this, but I got to admit, on Saturday, one of the TVs had the wedding or whatever on, the British. I didn't turn it to change the channel to watch more of this because different dateline, same story. It's just, what's that famous Onion headline, Andrew? I mean, they're satirical, but it says, no way to prevent this, says only nation where this regularly happens.
And they've posted that. That's been the Onion's tweet after every mass shooting or every school shooting for years now. And they just keep having to repost the exact same tweet.
And we've had 288 mass shootings in our schools versus countries where there are not guns readily accessible, where there's 0 or 1. I mean, we have an epidemic in our country. The NRA donated $30 million to Trump's campaign, and they've bought off a lot of our Congress. I think you're going to see this election uniquely for the first time, these teens, and my kid being one of them, who are registering to vote, and they are going to get to the polls. That's going to be a major unaccounted for dynamic, these high school seniors around the country, because they have grown up. I mean, these kids are, the last before 9/11. They were not alive for 9/11. They're last, or they were just very young for 9/11, and they've only lived in fear of this actually happening. There was nothing this school could have done. They had armed security. They had done the drills. They did everything that the Republican Party has said you need to do to make your school safer, and they weren't safe.
Molly, to the point that Amy makes, listen, there's people very passionately, they feel on both sides of this issue. And I really don't want to demonize either, except I heard something that was staggering to me. Not just the number that more kids have died in schools because of school shootings than are soldiers that are professional soldiers on battlefields, but when kids get assigned seats at the beginning of the school year, there's conversations about who's the one closest to the door if somebody came in with a gun. Think about just how bizarre the conversations we have to have as a country right now, where you don't dismiss these people as, just ridiculous. That's a legitimate conversation that's happening in a school that, my kids, your kids, whatever, go to in America right now. My God, what's happened to us?
It's tragic, and it's on both sides of the aisle. People from every political persuasion think it's an awful thing that we're dealing with. However, the vast majority of legal gun owners are good, law-abiding citizens. They do not condone this behavior. They do not defend this behavior. And frankly, I think anecdotally, at least in my case, many people believe we need common sense gun safety laws that make sense. Federally, we have great gun laws.
So you're the perfect person to ask this question.
Okay.
The president, as we knew, recently called out Republicans sitting at a table saying he was the guy who wasn't afraid of the NRA.
Yes.
And he, in fact, who was it from Pennsylvania, Andrew, that he called out? Toomey, right? Yeah. Senator Toomey called it. 97% of the public, more than 90%, I think, of the NRA members want universal background checks. Yes. They want the bumps. I mean, we can find things we actually agree on in this country. Why couldn't the president do that and have political cover to do it?
I don't have the answer to that question. It would be
nice.
That
wouldn't solve everything. I know it wouldn't, but that would be a start. Why can't we even do that?
It would be nice if the NRA lined up with its members. I think the leadership is out of step. I think, and based on a lot of information, if they would make a little compromise and say, okay, universal background checks, okay, raise the age to 21.
No fly,
okay,
stuff like that.
Bump
right.
stocks. Like there are a few things.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I agree, and I think the vast majority of people who are Republican or conservative.
And Andrew, I think politically, the person who does that will be shocked at the political equity they'll get as a consequence. It'll be a rare sign of profile and courage in today's environment.
Unfortunately, there hasn't been an example of that. So there's there have been negative examples where support for gun control has cost people their seat, and until we see a reverse example of that, I don't think you're going to see it. The only other issue I can think of where you have the two sides on completely different scripts, not even accepting the same fact base, is climate change, where it just seems like, the debate on climate change, the two sides there's no crossover. They're reading off two completely different sets of talking points. And it's the same here on gun safety. The aftermath of these shootings is to enhance school security or to limit the door space or whatever the case may be. It's the guns.
Can I throw one thing out there?
Sure.
We should look at this holistically. Yes, guns are an issue, but so is mental health, so is school infrastructure. And I think if we could, and this is the compromise that comes from the left, let's look at the issues that are bigger than
You're
that.
right. No, you're right. You're right.
But schools in other countries have zero. Like, wait, they don't have guns in the
We're not
UK.
getting
They've
rid of all
had
the guns.
zero.
We're not.
We can't get rid of all the guns.
But Molly, here's
But
my
we can
point,
get
and I'm
rid
not
of
giving,
the-
and I'm not giving you a hard time for it. For me, where I take issue is, if I thought some, not you, but some who say it's mental health, these kids are all troubled. What's the commonality? They got a gun and they're all troubled kids. I then look at the funding that they're appropriating. I mean, some of these states, they've cut down all the facilities where kids can actually spend overnight if they're deemed a danger to themselves or others. They cut down the funding for the mental health professionals in the schools. So I hear the words, and I would take them more credibly. But I
Trump
take it more
revoked,
credibly if they go
It's
down
not
that road.
An Obama era, like money that was set aside for mental health. That was one of his acts in the first year. It was actually right before Las Vegas.
We've had shootings under both administrations,
Yes.
under both parties' leaderships. But I'm just saying, I think that for once people would be shocked if they actually tried it, a modest first step, that politically there wouldn't be a price to pay and there'd actually be some people who would cross over and support someone if they took some action. I got to hit a break. I'm sorry. When we come back here, I mentioned before the midterm elections. Well, they're less than 6 months away. Democrats trying to figure out whether to focus on Trump, his scandals, and even say the I word here, or will they look back in November and said, what have we done? Stay with us.